very rural area, about an hour from the city. Honestly, I hadn't really taken these days off for any particular reason. I guess I was just feeling like I needed a break. It was on my first day off, as I stayed at home and watched TV, among doing some other small things around the house. Around dinner time, though, a knock came from the front door. I sat up from the couch and looked at the clock, seeing it was 7 p.m. It's strange for anyone to get a house roll, but given the time as well, it was even more so. I walked up to the door and cracked it open. A man was on the doorstep, smiling at me. He looked like any other guy, no special feature. I asked, looking around behind him and noticing no car or truck in my driveway. The man maintained his smile as he went through a whole scenario he was in just a few minutes ago. He said he was on the road that connected to my driveway when someone slammed into his car and drove off, leaving him stranded and having to come to me for help. The way he described it, and just from looking at him, things didn't seem to add up. My driveway was far from the road, and the chances he got into an accident right by the entrance was almost zero on such an empty road. I told him I'd call the police for him if he'd like, but the man declined. He said he wanted to borrow my phone to call his wife. It took me a few seconds to respond, because being unsure about the situation made me nervous to say no to him. I said I would call the police and that was it, but the man's smile went away as he said don't worry about it and walked away from the porch. I closed the door, then looked out the window as the man walked down the driveway and disappeared in the dark. After a moment, I called the police just to be safe. About 20 minutes later though, I got a call back from them saying there were no signs of any crashes on the road. I stayed up late that night, looking out the windows and just being overall a little bit uneasy. But once it got to around 12, I was too tired to stay up. I went upstairs to my bedroom and got ready, then got in bed and fell fast asleep. I remember waking up frantically, but not understanding why. Like maybe I'd heard something in my sleep, but didn't wake up fast enough to comprehend it. Looking over, it was about 3 a.m. I got up from my bed and walked over to the door so I could listen for any sounds in the rest of the house. It was mostly quiet, but I could hear a slight rustling sound from somewhere outside. I carefully walked down the stairs to check on it, thinking it was probably just a bush brushing against the house. But as I got to the downstairs hallway, I realized moving. It was going along the edge of the house and toward the front. I felt my heart start racing as I tried to reassure myself, but then the rustling stopped, and only a moment later, there was a knock at the door. Stood still at the end of the hallway and stared at the front door, terrified of whoever was out there. After a few seconds, I moved away and up to a small window on the side of the house that had a view of the porch. Through the blinds, I could see two men, both in dark clothing, and both holding something in their hands. It looked like tools or weapons of some kind. My eyes widened in fear as I backed away and quietly walked back up to my room. More knocking echoed through the house as I called the police and locked myself in. As I stayed on the phone, the knocks turned into banging thuds. I immediately knew it was what I feared. They were trying to break the door down. Hit after hit, non-stop for over 5 minutes, they banged on the door, shaking the whole house. Then the operator finally said an officer was pulling up to my house, and at that same time, All the banging stopped. When the cop pulled up, though, he said he didn't see any men at my door. They must have run off just before he could see them. The door, however, was barely hanging on. The wood was bent and splintered, with only the bolt locks still in place. I was lucky that the police were able to show up quick enough, but I guess I was also smart to have not helped that one man. I'm assuming if I had, I would have only accelerated their plans to do whatever it was they were trying to do. Even today, though, I still worry about them coming back.
Surprisingly, this is one of those stories I forgot about until a few days ago when I was talking to a school friend on call and I got reminded of this. She was pretty freaked when I told her. You see, this happened when I was roughly maybe 7 or 8, so some of the details are a bit fuzzy, but I remember it pretty vividly. This may seem like unimportant context, but my family had just moved to America and were renting the top portion of your regular suburban house. It's a pretty safe cul-de-sac. I had friends, they were triplets, about 3 houses down, not far, and every day I'd go hang with them, and around 9 in the night, my older brother, around 11 or 12, I'd say, would make a minute walk and come and get me and walk me home since I was pretty young. One night he came to get me as usual. The sun wasn't fully down, but it was getting pretty dark. We started down the walk as normal when he started casting glances over his shoulder. I didn't really notice until he shoved me hard away from the sidewalk and between 2 houses. Each house had a huge fence that separated their backyard, not ours though, and he had made me crouch behind the fence. I remember being really scared, but more confused since I had no damn idea what the hell was going on. More specifically, he was a pretty big prankster. Once he convinced me my older sister crashed her car into the ocean, so I didn't really believe him when he turned and said, "Walk behind the houses. I think someone's following us." Now looking back now, he was probably keeping calm. However, whoever I turned around and looked. The man had followed us behind the edge of a few houses down near a different fence line. He had a black hoodie on, with a hood up, black sweatpants, and white sneakers. I had pretty bad eyesight due to some health problems, but back then it was crystal clear. I'd see with horrifying clarity that his jaw was just hanging open, like he was just standing there with his jaw hung open. It was horrifying. I think now that I'm older, maybe he had some kind of medical condition that affected his jaw, or maybe he did crack, I don't know. But back then, I could have sworn on God that I was seeing some kind of demon. Now anyway, my brother, when he saw that I was looking and getting ready to freak out, he told me, "Just run, as fast as I can to our house." And we booked it. Neither of us looked back, but we were so scared out of our minds. And like I said, we only rented the top portion of the house, so the bottom, with a sliding door in the backyard, belonged to some other tenant. I don't remember if she was home or not. I remember tugging that thing open and locking it as fast as I can. And I looked up. He was there in the yard, a little away from the door, just staring at us, with that jaw. Me and my brother told my sister and my mother immediately. My father was away for a work trip at the time. But nothing came of it, not until the day after. We went to meet my dad at his warehouse, which had a small live-in portion above it where we lazed around until he was ready to head home with us. Around dusk, he came up and told us that we might have to wait since the police were there. He walked us around to the back window of the small area to show us police officers all around the backyard area of the warehouses. There were a few in line, and a white van parked on the grass by the edge of the woods. Like I said, I was pretty young, so I don't remember many details of what actually happened, but I do remember my dad, who hadn't been told about the day prior, telling us that they found a man and a woman in the van. The man, he said, had his mouth hanging wide open. He seemed really disturbed while telling me about the whole thing and wouldn't answer any more questions about the woman. Maybe she was dead. I have zero idea. I do know that they were arrested on trespassing charges. I don't know anything else, and I haven't asked about it. I doubt that he'd remember. It's been over a decade, and he's pushing 70, but it freaks me out to this day. I still can't believe it happened, and I don't have any answers for it. I talked to my brother briefly about it in hopes that he remembered more than I do, but all I got was a long tirade about whatever medical condition the guy probably had for his mouth to be like that. He's an annoying medical student now, and sometimes I think maybe the guy didn't mean any harm and was just drugged out of his mind, but this was in the world's safest neighborhood and doesn't explain why or how he showed up at my dad's workplace.
A few years back, I worked at a dollar store in my city. It was like 5 minutes away from my apartment, and I worked as a cashier. After having the job for several months, I was working one night like any other. Usually, we had 1 or 2 employees working at once, because the store was small. I was by myself on this night, and it was maybe 4 or 5 p.m. There were about 2 or 3 customers in the store at once on average. I remember that a man walked in as I stood behind the counter at one of the 2 check lanes that we had. After he walked inside, he went down one of the first aisles and disappeared. Another customer came and checked out about a minute later. Probably 20 minutes or so later, the man checked out. He came up to me and set down just 1 drink. I don't remember exactly what it was. The man had long hair and was wearing sunglasses, I remember. After he paid, he left the store. The interaction was really nothing out of the ordinary. He didn't say much at all, if anything, to me. But I remember that after he left the store, he was hanging around by the front for a while. I could see out of the front window to the sidewalk out front and a bit of the parking lot. We were also connected to some other businesses as part of the strip mall. None of the businesses ever seemed to be all that busy though. So I kept working, and every now and then would see the guy. He was just kind of hanging out on the sidewalk out front. I didn't really think too much of it though. I checked out some more customers, and people would come and go from the store. But the man remained out front. Eventually, hours went by. Soon it was nighttime, and the store got even quieter. I noticed that the guy was still standing out front. What was he doing here for so long? I really didn't know, but I also didn't really care that much. Sometimes he would look over in the window, and I thought he might come back in the store, but he didn't. Only 1 or 2 more customers came in for the rest of the time that we were open. Then it was time for me to close up and leave. I'd been working by myself that day because business was slow. When it was 9 o'clock, I locked the doors and saw the guy look over when I did. Then I clocked out, did a few last-minute things, and left the store by probably 9:15. After walking out, the guy was still standing there, about 15 feet to my right. I went to my car in the parking lot and got inside. Then I started driving back home. I needed to get gas though, and I stopped about halfway back. I went to a smaller neighborhood gas station on a corner. When I got there, I got out of my car and started filling it with gas. About a minute into doing that, I saw this older beat-up looking car enter the gas station. The car was blue and also pretty small. It did not drive to a gas pump, but instead parked in one of the few spaces that was on the side. I happened to notice the driver and realized that it was the same guy from the dollar store, the man with long hair and sunglasses. Now, at first, I thought this was just a coincidence, because the gas station wasn't that far away from the dollar store. Still, it was kind of weird. I mean, this guy was standing around outside for hours. And then when I left, he leaves. When my gas station was full, I decided to go inside of the gas station. I was just going to get something to eat to have when I got home. The man was still inside of the car at this point and just sitting there. I left my car and walked inside the store. I was browsing around looking for something and noticed the same man walking in. Now I was worried. It seemed a little too strange for this guy to suddenly come inside the store now that I did. I left right there, not even bothering to buy anything. When I did, I saw the guy start to walk out after me. I quickly hurried to my car, started the engine, and drove away. As I was getting out of the parking lot, I saw the guy getting inside of his car. I quickly turned down one of the residential streets and turned my headlights off. It was hard to see, but I went down that street and then took a left. The guy would have no way of knowing where I went. He didn't follow me, probably because he couldn't see me. So after that, I was able to drive home, and I made it back okay. After that night, I didn't see the guy for the rest of the time that I worked at the dollar store. I'm not sure why he did what he did that night. It was very strange.
This happened just a month ago. I was moving across a few states to a new apartment and stopped at a motel overnight. I didn't plan the entire route, or which motel I would stay at. I just went with the closest one after I started getting sleepy. I'd never stayed in a motel before, but when I pulled in, it was about how I would have expected it to be. It was in the middle of the woods off the side of the road and was a bit run down looking, and not somewhere I'd want to spend more than a night at. The parking spots were all empty, not even one car. I wasn't even sure how the worker at the front desk had gotten there. I got a room though, and walked down to my door and went inside. Again, it was run down and kind of gross, but it was better than nothing, I guess. I was gonna shower, but the tub was really filthy, so I pretty much went right to bed. I lay down and tried to get comfortable, but before I even turned off the lamp, I heard an odd noise from outside the room. Door handles shaking, coming from a few rooms down. Then again, but closer. Someone was going down the line of doors and trying each door handle like they were trying to see if any of them were open or unlocked. They got to my door and tried it as well, and after a short pause, they continued moving down the line. It was probably the strangest thing I'd seen in a while, and I had no clue why anyone would be doing that, unless maybe they were looking to score a free room. I laid back down and closed my eyes, only to be disturbed again by someone banging on my door. It sounded almost like they were punching the door. I got up and realized the door had no way of seeing outside, so I flipped the latch over and opened it a crack. A man was standing there with a grim look and seemed frustrated about something. He was older, maybe mid-40s, with longish hair and a beard.
"What's your problem?"
I said, upset about the way he'd banged on my door. The man gave me a cold look and asked an unusual question.
"Did you pay for this room?"
I looked at him confused and said yeah, but he gave me a questioning response like he didn't think I did. He asked me to come with him to the service counter to get it figured out, because he was told that this was his room. This situation already started out strange, but this had me even more puzzled. No other cars here, and likely nobody else, so the possibility of us accidentally given the same room within just a few minutes was nearly zero, and they probably would have had another key to the room if they were telling the truth. The guy asked me again in an aggressive tone to come out, but I'd already decided I wasn't leaving the room. I started to close the door, but the guy slammed his body against it to prevent me from fully. In an instant, another guy came from around the wall with some tool that he was putting against the lock, trying to unlatch it. All I could do was press up against the door and try to push it closed, but the force of both men pushing was overpowering me. In the chaos, the door moving knocked the tool out of his hand, and when both of them down, I slammed the door shut. After the door, their departing gave me relief, and I called 911. The crazy is that they didn't have a car. We stopped shooting straight into the woods behind the motel, leading to nothing but trees in it. It's not known what they were plotting, but seeing as they knew all the other rooms were vacant and still went for me, it could not have been good. I hope that if they go the other way, it would have been a quick worry. And nothing more. But I say I truly believe that. My 20s as an overnight lead. It wasn't one of your regular big chain grocery stores. It was a local place with only about 8 or 9 locations. Most nights I have an overnight stalker to help out, but it wasn't common for me to spend the whole shift alone. Again, not the biggest store, so it really wasn't a very intense working environment. A lot of the time I find myself working slow, just so I wouldn't run out of things to do. This was one night where I was alone and working the days. At the beginning of my shift, I loaded up some boxes and moved into the aisles to start stalking. It doesn't take much mental effort, so my mind was elsewhere and just thinking about random things, not really paying any attention. I went through about 3 aisles until a knock at the front entrance made me jump. I almost didn't even realize what it was, so spaced out. But once I did, I got really confused. I heard them knock again, loud enough to echo through the store. I walked down to the end of the aisle through the large front windows, seeing a man in a hood standing at the doors. I went up to the other side.
We're closed. Won't be open until 8 a.m.
I said through the glass. The man looked at me, but didn't say anything. I pointed at the sign on the door. I repeated. The man continued to look at me for a few seconds, then turned and walked away. I watched him walk until I couldn't see him anymore, but it didn't look like he had parkware. The whole thing was odd to say the least, but I figured he was just at the wrong place or something. I went back to what I was doing, stocking up the shelves and eventually forgetting about the man. By 2 a.m., I'd gotten through half of the aisles and was ready to take my lunch break. I left the boxes where they were and went to the break room on the other end of the building. I was in there for probably a good half hour before I tossed the rest of my lunch and went back to work. I walked through the store and to the end of the aisle I was working on, but just as I looked up, there was a man walking past the other end. He looked like he was just walking across the store, not having noticed me. I fell in place, feeling that instant rush of fear. Now listen intently. I the side of the building I'd just come from, so I moved into behind the shelf. The foot sounded like they went for the break room, but just before I left the aisle to try and get help, I heard the man rushing out of the room. The footsteps were now sprinting through the store, getting closer and closer. Ran for the other end of the aisle, looking back and seeing the man turn in and start running at me. I ran to the front door, thinking he's out, and trying to duck it with shaky hands. The man appeared at the end of the aisle just as it opened. And just as I stepped out of the building, I saw a bright flash in the corner of my eye and heard a pop sound in my ears ring.
Much mental effort, but my mind was
a gunshot. So loud I didn't even know where it landed. I sprinted for my life around the building. I made it to my car and hid in the back seat. I called 911. And what I know, the man didn't follow me outside. He was gone by the time police made it to the store, but they found the back door to be busted open, along with some heavy tools sitting next to it. The most terrifying of their findings was the hole created by the gunshot, sitting right to the side of the front doors.
We're closed. Won't be open until 8 a.m. I said through the glass. The man but didn't say anything.
Why the man broke in and was so aggressive, targeting me like that, is unknown. From his behavior, the police seemed to think it was some kind of mental breakdown or psychotic break, not having any real reason to target me specifically, other than the fact that I was alone.
The whole thing was odd, to say the least.
I never worked there, but I can tell you that for the years following that incident, I was on edge.
Knocking to the shelves in a mass. 2 a.m. I'd gotten through half of the aisles and was ready to take my lunch break. I left when they were
Every single night.
building. I was in there for probably a good half hour before I tossed the rest of my lunch and went back to work. I walked through the store.
Instagram for a long time.
But just as
I never pursued a big following on it, but
there was a
over the years I accumulated nearly 1,000 followers, and I followed twice as many accounts. The feature where the app suggests my followers to blame for that, as I tend to click follow on people I think are interesting or going off in favor.
the side of the building. I just come
They popped up. Her profile was a fairly cute girl, so I went through her profile. The post back pretty far. She had the same number of followers as me and was very pretty. So I must. The kind of balance that screen girlfriend would tear me. Of course, I followed her.
the footsteps were now sprinting through this and closer and closer. Ran for
The only odd thing on her profile that suggested anything was amiss was that there was an unusually large gap in her last few posts. And this post was a little different than the rest. She showed her face, but the last post was from a week earlier.
guy opposite it open.
And it was just a picture of the front of a coffee shop with the caption, "Back from the breakup. I guess I'll be spending all my time here again." However, I instantly recognized the coffee shop because it was in my
Much mental effort, but my mind was on
city just 3 miles from my house. It's a cool hangout spot I've been to if you can fit in the crowd. Of course, if there's a
And what I know, the men the outside.
there, I was totally trying my luck again, hang out there over and over to eventually ring the door. She followed back. Then I got a message from her. My heart burned with excitement as I read it and replied. For normal for a while, we texted back and forth, just getting general things out of each other. Then she dropped a bomb for her break boyfriend. She got screwed
The man broke in. It was so aggressive to be like that.
over in pretty much every way. Losing all her friends, her apartment, having to live. She tried to make friends with a new crowd of people who had grown into her old hangout spot in the years of her absence, but she couldn't fit in either. Her social confidence had shot. Apparently, found it easier to make friends online, and that's where I came in. She said I looked like a keen, trustworthy guy, and she wanted to meet me, not for a one-night stand, rebound, or anything. Just have company, be cuddle, and potentially crash my place. I accepted him. I had to inside, thinking I could turn this girl into my girlfriend in a couple weeks. She was that on her ex. But we've been texting for several hours, from 8 p.m. to midnight. So she asked to come over right away because her car was parked in a sketchy area. I told her to come right over and gave her my address. She said it'd take 20 minutes, so I quickly tidied things up for her arrival and made some tea. About half an hour after her last text, I was starting to get catfished. But then there was finally a knock on my door. I walked up and looked at the people, and lo and behold, there she was. The perfect cute girl of my dreams. She was much more rough looking in the last few weeks, but that didn't matter to me. If anything, it showed me the way she might look right after getting out of bed in the morning. I still loved what I saw. I opened the door. She was very shy and kept apologizing for no reason. Thinking she was no burden, I knew her ex must have done a number on her. I told her to make herself at home and sit on the couch. The tea had gotten cold, so I asked her if she still wanted some. But she was very hesitant to accept it, even though it clearly looked like she wanted it. As popping the cup in the microwave for her was a huge, bothersome task. Finally, after I insisted, she accepted it with a warm smile. She had taken off her shoes and had pulled up over her whole body except for cuddling one of the throw pillows underneath. I gave her the tea, and I sat down in the chair across from her and tried not to stay. It was a wonderful sight to see her enjoying a simple, wholesome treat after going through it for so long. We talked as she sipped it down, and by the time she was finished, she was slurring her words and falling into the image. Before she knew it, she leaped for life. She woke up in my basement cellar, her hands and feet tied together and chained to the wall. It wasn't until 8 in the morning that I finally heard her faint screaming for help. But no help will ever come for her. She was the perfect captive, physically attractive but also weak, emotionally vulnerable, naive, and suggestible. Nobody cares about her, so I don't think she's even been reported missing yet. I do what I please her, putting her through degrading conditions for days at a time, then giving her small but meaningful moments of reprieve. She gets little treats to keep her spirits right at the level I want them to be. For the moment, she's complacent, but if that were to ever change, I could break her easily. I know it's the stupidest thing I could do right now, this insatiable urge to brag on achievement. I found the deepest corner of the internet and covered my tracks getting there, and I hosted this knowing by the time it seeps out onto the surface web, nobody will be able to trace it back to me.